Hey gang, and welcome back. Just a reminder, you can now use the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, at flipsidegaming.com. You'll get 10% off orders over $10 and help with the channel at the same time. Sit down and strap in, cause this is another double feature. This first game has two new commanders from Rivals Vixalon, and Sean is playing his Elenda deck and keeps a hand with Orzhov Signet, Orzhov Guildgate, 2 Swamps, Sanctum Seeker, Forerunner of the Legion, and Legion's Landing. Matt is playing his Edgar Markov deck and keeps a hand with Legion's Landing, Phyrexian Arena, Blood Crypt, Swamp, Mountain, Perforos, and Chromatic Lantern. Tony is back and playing Bontu again and keeps a hand with 2 Swamps, Jet Medallion, Bontu's Monument, Arengaric's Wake, and Phyrexian Reclamation. Lastly, Harry is testing out his new Zacama Primal Calamity deck and keeps a hand with Farseek, Exotic Orchard, Search for Tomorrow, Gruul Turf, Emeria Shepherd, Temple of Plenty, and Leave to Chance. Harry wins the die roll and starts us off. Harry plays a Temple of Plenty, scrying the top card and putting it on the bottom. Sean plays an Orzhov Guildgate and passes turn. Tony plays a Swamp and casts a Phyrexian Reclamation. Matt plays a tapped Blood Crypt and passes to Harry. Harry plays Exotic Orchard and casts a Farseek to grab a Plateau and passes. Sean plays a Swamp and casts Orzhov Signet. Tony also plays a Swamp and casts a Jet Medallion and passes to Matt. Matt plays a Windscarred Crag for his turn, gaining 1 life. For Harry's turn, he casts Search for Tomorrow, grabbing a forest. He then plays a Gruul Turf and bounces the Temple of Plenty back to his hand. Sean plays a Swamp and casts Forerunner of the Legion. Sean gets to go and find Captivating Vampire and puts it on top, but not before casting Legion's Landing and getting a white vampire token with lifelink. Tony plays a Swamp and casts Bontu's Monument before passing to Matt. Matt plays a Mountain and casts Chromatic Lantern. He then taps a Lantern to cast Legion's Landing of his own and gains a vampire token. Harry replays the Temple of Plenty he bounced and scries the top card. He keeps it on top and passes turn. Sean casts Captivating Vampire in his main phase and puts the Forerunner trigger on the token. Sean then swings said token at Tony for 3 and gains 3 life. Tony plays a Swamp and casts Bontu for 1 mana. He drains everyone at the table for 1 and gains 1 life from the monument before passing to Matt. Matt plays a Temple of Triumph, scrying the top card and keeping it on top. He then pays 4 to cast Perforos and passes to Harry. Harry casts Verdant Confluence, choosing the third option of finding a basic 3 times. Harry then goes to find them and passes turn. Sean casts Elenda and puts the Forerunner trigger on the token once more. Moving to combat, Sean swings the Captivating Vampire at Harry and the Forerunner and the token at Matt for 6. This flips the Legion's Landing to a Danse the First Fort and Sean gains 3 life. Tony plays a Swamp and casts a Nirkana Revenant. He drains everyone for 1 and passes turn. Matt plays a Swamp for his turn and plays his own Captivating Vampire. This triggers Edgar Markov and has a token come into play. The token and Captivating Vampire both trigger Perforos, and the rest of the table take 2 twice. Harry taps out in his main phase to cast Zacama. He then gets to untap all of his lands and casts Rishkar's Expertise, drawing 9 cards and getting to cast something that costs 5 or less for free. Harry then gets to cast Early Harvest for free, untapping all his basics. Harry then casts Eldritch Evolution, sacrificing Zacama as part of the cost to go and find Regal Behemoth. He puts Zacama into the graveyard, and Harry gets the title of Monarch. Harry then casts Emeria Shepherd and plays a Mountain, which triggers the Shepherd who returns Zacama to Harry's hand. Harry then finishes off his turn by tapping the Mountain to cast Graveshot. He's got enough Storm Count to wipe out almost all the vampires on the board, and with Elenda dying, Sean gets a vampire token. Harry then discards down to 7, but remembers that he is Monarch and draws and has to discard down to 7 again. Sean plays a Bojuka Bog as his land for turn, hosing Harry's graveyard. He then casts a Vanquisher's Banner, naming vampires, and passes to Tony. Tony taps 4 Swamps to cast Worst Fears in his main phase, targeting Harry. With nothing else, he passes turn. Matt plays a Dralnu Calastria Bloodchief and gets a token before dealing 4 to the table with Perforos triggers. He then passes to Harry, or should I say Tony. Tony plays a Rootbound Crag for Harry's turn and floats a bunch of mana before casting Zacama. Tony then casts Soul of the Harvest and floats even more mana to cast Ancestral Statue, bouncing Zacama back to his hand. He also gets to draw a card off the statue coming into play. Tony then plays Primordial Sage, drawing another one from the Soul of the Harvest, and recasts Zacama, drawing 2 and untapping all of his lands. Tony then casts Ashnod's Altar, to which he sacrifices Zacama to gain 2 colorless mana. Tony then casts a Farhaven Elf, drawing off the cast to the Sage before finding a basic and drawing from the Soul as it enters the battlefield. With a basic coming into play, Tony brings back Zacama with the Emeria Shepherd trigger. Tony then casts Boundless Realms, pulling pretty much every basic out of Harry's library. Tony then casts Mana Geyser, gaining 14 red mana, and has more than enough to recast Zacama once more, untapping a stack of lands. Tony then draws 2 more from the Sage and the Soul, and casts Eldrami's Call to find White Mane Lion. Tony then taps out, floating even more mana, and we all wish someone had a copy of Glorious End. Tony then casts Recruiter of the Guard to go and find Stuffy Doll, and casts White Mane Lion, drawing 2, and bouncing Zacama back to his hand once more. Tony then recasts Zacama, untapping his lands and drawing 2 more. Tony then casts a Stuffy Doll, naming Matt, and draws 2. We then see Tony cast Enlightened Tutor to go and find Panharmonicon and put it on top. Tony then casts a Drag a Tree Speaker, drawing 2, one of which is a Panharmonicon. Panharmonicon then hits the field, and Tony casts Core Skyfisher. This, when coupled with the Panharmonicon, allows Tony to cast the Skyfisher and bounce 2 creatures back to his hand, allowing him to bounce the Skyfisher and Zacama, creating infinite mana. Tony then uses this mana to activate Zacama's ability to deal damage to the Stuffy Doll and kill Matt. Tony is also able to continually bounce the Stuffy Doll back to his hand and recast it to name Sean, doing the same cycle to kill Sean, before doing the cycle once more and naming Harry and killing Harry. Moving to game 2, I am playing Dralnu, and I keep a hand with Arcane Denial, Tainted Isle, Forbidden Alchemy, Dark Petition, Reality Shift, Swamp, and Polluted Delta. Sean is playing his Ur-Dragon deck and keeps a hand with Plateau, Badlands, Bayou, Felwar Stone, Udvara Hellkite, Thunderbreak Regent, and Polluted Delta. Trevor is playing his Ikra and Vial Smasher deck and keeps a hand with Swamp, Exotic Orchard, Stomping Ground, Rites of Flourishing, Siphon Mind, and Curtain's Call. Lastly, Matt is playing his Temmet deck and keeps a hand with Sublime Archangel, Supplant Form, Vizier of Many Faces, Felwar Stone, Temple of Enlightenment, Plains, and Azorius Signet. Trevor wins the die roll and starts us off. Trevor plays a tap Stomping Ground and passes turn. I play and crack a Polluted Delta to find a Sunken Hollows. Sean also plays a Polluted Delta and cracks it to go and find Blood Crypt. Matt plays a Temple of Enlightenment, scrying the top card and keeping it on top. Trevor plays an Exotic Orchard and passes turn. I play a Tainted Isle and also pass. Sean plays a Badlands and casts a Felwar Stone before passing to Matt. Matt plays a Plains and casts his own Felwar Stone as well and passes. Trevor plays a Swamp before casting Rites of Flourishing. He then plays a second Swamp and passes turn. I draw 2 and play 2 lands for my turn before passing to Sean. Sean casts a Thunderbreak Regent during his first main phase, and with his Dragon resolving, he drops 2 Shock lands and passes turn. Matt plays a Plains and casts Soul Ring. He then taps his Soul Ring to cast an Azorius Signet. Matt then finishes off his turn by casting Temmet and passes to Trevor. Trevor draws 2 and casts Siphon Mine in his main phase because apparently drawing only 2 isn't enough. We all pitch a card and Trevor draws 3 more. Trevor then moves to his end of turn and has to discard as he's drawn no lands in those 5 cards. At the end of his turn, I cast Forbidden Alchemy and keep a card. I play Myron the Moaning Well and an island for turn and cast a Soul Ring. I then pay 5 to cast a Dark Petition, making sure I have Spell Mastery. I grab Gilded Lotus, showing the table as I use my remaining mana to cast the artifact and pass turn. Sean plays a Volcanic Island and a Plateau for his land for turn, and casts Tempt with Vengeance where X is 4. Matt takes the deal, but Trevor and I decline. Moving to combat, Sean swings the 8 at me for 8. In his second main phase, Sean casts the Throne of the God Pharaoh, which I put a stop to with Arcane Denial. On Matt's upkeep, Sean draws 2 while I draw 1. Matt then pays 4 to cast the Sublime Archangel, making it very clear why he was so willing to take the tokens from Sean. Moving to combat, Matt puts the Temmet trigger on one of the tokens and swings it at Sean. This trigger is exalted on all of Matt's creatures, pumping that lowly 2/2 to become an 8/8. Trevor is unfortunately unable to draw lands this game beyond his first 4, and he casts the Swiftfoot Boots in his main phase. Trevor then has to discard Curtain's Call and pass his turn. For my turn, I cast a Mana Vault and follow up with a Decree of Pain. Matt isn't ready to lose his stuff at the moment and tries to stop it with a Swan Song. Trevor, however, wants to get back in the game, and with the Swan Song on the stack, decides to cast Fork on my Decree of Pain. Trevor's copy of Decree of Pain then resolves first, and he draws 15 cards, while mine gets countered, and I cast a Crystal Shard before passing to Sean. The first thing Sean does for his turn is cast a Dragon Tempest, and follows up by casting a Xenograph, naming dragons. We then realize I should have a bird token on Matt's turn, and I put it onto the field as Matt plays a Master Splicer, gaining a Golem token. He then passes to Trevor. Trevor plays 2 Buddy lands, Rootbound Crag and Dragonskull Summit, as his lands for turn. Trevor then casts a Vial Smasher, followed by Kadama's Reach to go and find a basic for the field and 1 for the hand. I take 1 on my upkeep from the tap mana vault, and I play Dreadship Reef for my land for turn and pass to Sean. Sean plays a Godless Shrine, paying 2 life to have it come into play untapped. Sean then commits himself to potentially being blown out, but pays to cast an Avenger of Zendikar. Unfortunately, I have no counters in hand, nor does Matt, so Sean resolves the Avenger, which comes into play. He resolves the Dragon Tempest trigger first, dealing 1 to me. He then resolves the Avenger trigger, which in turn puts 8 Dragon Tempest triggers on the stack. As all of Sean's creatures are now dragons, this means each of those triggers is worth 9 points of damage. Sean decides to take me and Trevor out of the game with the triggers, and passes to Matt. Matt casts Descend upon the Sinful in his main phase to X all of Sean's dragon plants. With nothing else, Matt passes turn. Sean draws only 1 for his turn, and casts Purphoros in his main phase. He then casts a Fairy Artisans, dealing 2 to Matt from Purphoros and 1 from the Dragon Tempest. At the end of turn, Matt casts Enlightened Tutor to find a grafted exoskeleton. Sean points out how poorly this ended last time when Matt had the equipment out, but Matt's not about to repeat the past. For Matt's turn, he casts a Batterskull in his main phase and passes turn. Sean casts an Udvara Hellkite in his main phase, dealing 2 from both Purphoros and the Dragon Tempest to Matt. Sean then moves to combat and swings both at Matt. This gives Sean 2 more dragon tokens, who enter and deal 5 and 6 damage respectively from the Purphoros and Tempest triggers, and Matt then takes a further 8 damage just from the attack. In Sean's second main phase, he casts a Mirror Entity who deals 2 to Matt and 5 damage to the Germ token from the Tempest trigger. Matt draws for turn, but with the Dragon Onslaught a turn away and no board wipes in hand, he scoops it up and concedes to Sean. Game review time, so we're only going to look at the winning decks, and in the first game, Harry's Zacama deck seems to basically be a Naya Storm deck, and it was really fun to see. What made it even more enjoyable to me is the fact that he didn't even get to play it, and in fact actually lost to his own deck. So props to Tony for being able to steal his turn with Worth Spheres. Tony playing through that one turn unfortunately took about half the gameplay video, which can definitely be chalked up to the fact that he doesn't know the deck because it's not his. And I think the deck is pretty strong, but it probably would have lost to any kind of disruption should anyone have had instant speed removal. So hopefully that gave you guys a bit of a taste for what Zacama can do when built by a player like Harry. The second game, however, unfortunately was a result of not respecting Xenograft and Dragon Tempest. Looking back at this game, I probably should have flashed back to Forbidden Alchemy, but I didn't recall it being in my graveyard, and frankly I don't run that many counterspells, so it could have happened regardless. I enjoy seeing Sean's Dragon deck because he gets to play a lot of cards that I don't typically see in EDH, like Conspiracy and Xenograft, which he always uses to name dragons. There wasn't an obvious answer to Sean this game outside of countering the Avenger of Zendikar to save Trevor and myself, but beyond that, he just seemed to have the answers at the right time and be in the right place. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/MTGMudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/MTGMudsta. This video is brought to you in part by support from my Patreons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit my Patreon link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.